Hi, it's Steve Longi, and welcome to the How to Market and Sell Your Screenplay to Hollywood webinar. So first, a little background on me. I'm a veteran film and television producer with over 20 years experience. I co-produced the Academy Award-winning film Hacksaw Ridge and over 14 other films, including the Emmy-nominated Prayers for Bobby with Sigourney Weaver. I've made studio and independent films, and I've worked with some of the top people in the business. And my films have been in a lot of the festivals, including Sundance, Venice, Tribeca, and I've worked on and developed over 100 film and TV projects. In fact, I just finished a film in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm in the process of setting up more projects later this year, such as The Birth of Hacksaw Ridge, which is based on a book I published about the life of Desmond T. Doss. I also provide consulting services to help writers improve their screenplays and market their work. Other services I provide can be found on Longitude Entertainment. That's at www.longitudeentertainment.com. And for more premium content, be sure to subscribe by clicking on the link below. Okay, once again, this webinar is called How to Market and Sell Your Screenplay to Hollywood. So if you've finished your screenplay, congratulations. This is something a lot of people dream about doing, but they actually never do it. So good for you for taking action and finishing it. Now, there's an old saying, screenplays are never actually finished. They're only abandoned. And I think that's true. But, at some point you have to start the process of marketing. And you've got to get your screenplay out there in order for anything to happen with it. And you just got to take your shots, because you never know if this can even be possible to get a movie or a TV series made if you don't try. I think it was Mark Cuban who said you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, so you got to take your shots. Okay, one thing you're going to be told, though, is that in order to start, you're going to need an agent or manager to do this for you. And although in some cases that is true, you can pursue getting an agent or a manager. But if that's going to be your approach, you're very likely going to need a body of work, like a few marketable screenplays and maybe one or two TV pilot samples. If you're just starting out, a better way to go, and that's the way I'm going to be focusing on in this webinar, is to submit your screenplays directly to producers. Agents are primarily deal makers and managers are more long-term career builders, but producers are the ones who can hire you and sell and promote your work. Now, in the state of California, it's actually illegal for a manager to find clients' work. Only an agent is legally licensed to do that, but most every writer I've ever talked to has been the one to actually get their own work. Even the A-list writers and directors, it's really through their relationships and just through their own hustle that they find a lot of their own work. So getting your work out to producers is something you should get used to and learn how to do, and that will help propel you forward a lot quicker and help move you out in front of the pack. Now, when I work with clients, in addition to helping them improve their screenplays, I show them exactly how to do this, and I'm going to get into that process in detail in this webinar. So grab a pen and a piece of paper, or maybe open up a new file on your computer, because I'm going to give you a lot of great tips that you can use to market your work. Okay, so like I was saying, producers are the ones you want to be submitting to because they're the ones who get movies and TV series made. But just getting back to having an agent and a manager for a second, if you're optioned or getting your movie made, that will very likely attract an agent or a manager. So producers can help with that. And that's a much better way to go about it, to have something that's actually getting made or got some heat on it, and the agents and the managers will then come after you. So that's a much better approach. Producers are also promoters and champions of your work, so that's why you want to target them first. But you might say, Steve, producers don't accept unsolicited work. And, in some cases, this might be true, but in many cases it's not true. And in fact, I have a list of 100 producers, at least 100 producers, who accept a query letter or email, but we're going to get into that in a minute. Now, the key to this is knowing how to approach them so they're receptive to looking at or reading your material. And I can tell you, the one thing that you should never do is to send material to a producer who hasn't actually requested it. And this is what's called an unsolicited submission, and this is the one thing you should never really do. This is a serious faux pas, and when you do that, it could potentially put that producer in a precarious legal situation by exposing your work without having any sort of agreement in place. So that's not going to really endear you to anyone, and a producer, by law, has to delete that email ASAP. So that's just not the right approach. And when I ask people why they do this, they usually tell me it's because they think it's their only option. But I'm going to show you a lot of other better ways to do this. When I work with clients, that's what I'm doing. I'm showing them different ways of going about this, and I'm showing them the process of how to do this the right way. So you're interesting producers, you're endearing yourself to producers, and you're getting them to want to read your work. Now, all this is achievable, but like I said, you just have to know the right steps and what the right things are to do. I'm going to guide you through this process, tell you who to send it to and what to say, and also what to do if somebody shows interest. Now, these are all critical points that you want to get right along the way to ensure your success. I started my service to help writers because this is a serious profession like any other serious profession, kind of like being a doctor or a lawyer. It's not just something you dive into without any guidance or help. Okay? You really want to educate yourself about how it's done and learn how it works. And that's what is going to give you the best chance of success. Before you decide to send out your script, you want to formulate a strategy for how you're going to approach this. This first starts with assessing the marketable elements of your script. Okay, this is something you might want to think about before you actually write your script. Okay, what is the best story to write? All right, one that you're going to be able to market, one that has a lot of marketable elements. So one of the first marketable elements to a script is that it has a high concept. Now, high concept scripts tend to sell better because they're easier to market. And, marketing is really what drives a lot of the decisions down the line about whether or not your project's going to actually be made. So marketing is something you really want to be thinking about all through this process. If you write a high concept script, like I said, that's going to be a script that's going to probably be a lot easier to market. And you should consider finding what that high concept is in the story or idea that you want to write. Okay, one of the other things you want to think about is a title. I always think a really good title and a strong logline can really carry the day. Give some thought to what the title of your script is. Titles are definitely important. They can easily grab someone's attention if you've got a great title. If your title has a double meaning, I think that's always good. Or if there's an ironic twist to your title. There was a movie that came out recently. It was called Booksmart. I thought that was a great title because this was a comedy. Booksmart, I thought, was a really funny title because obviously these characters are not going to be doing the smartest things because they're just book smart. So I thought that was very clever. Okay, the next thing is to identify the correct genre of your film. And I mention this because I see a lot of people incorrectly identifying the genre, misidentifying the genre of their film, or combining a lot of different genres, which is a bit of a red flag for me because it makes me think that the tone might be a little uneven, because sometimes that can happen if you're trying to meld too many genres together. So try to keep it within one or two genres, 3 at the most, because balancing that tone is going to be challenging, and keeping a consistent tone, which is important in good screenwriting, will also be challenging if you have too many different tones. All right, another thing that interests me is a true story, something that's based on a true story. And you see a lot of these being set up, a lot of these movies being made now, movies that are based on true stories. So if there's a great true story that you know about, that might be something worth writing about. And when you're marketing your script, referring to it as something that was inspired by a true story, I think is helpful. It tells that producer that it's going to be a story that maybe was in the news, maybe people know about it already, might be something that's just more viable for those reasons. So I think true stories are always good to pursue. And what is the rating? This is something else to consider. Now, not everything is going to be theatrical, so rating these days has become a lot less relevant. But I think you want to think about figuring out where your film falls. Okay, so if it's an R-rated film, make sure that it's a hard R rating. Okay, because an R rating is very restrictive. And those films are a little harder to market because you're restricting your audience. So if you're going to go in that direction, have there be a real reason to go in that direction. I read a lot of scripts that are rated R just because there might be cigarette smoking in them. And that's going to be problematic because you're going to wind up excluding a huge swath of your audience just for maybe one scene where somebody's smoking a cigarette. So it's important to kind of, not only with the genre, but with the rating, to kind of get your film, get the tone of your film the genre of your film in a more specific space, because marketing also depends on that. Marketing is these days going to be targeted to a specific core audience. That's what's going to drive the marketing. So if you have an R-rated movie, that's going to determine who that movie is marketed to, obviously, and it's going to be everybody above the age of 17. So those are some things to think about. Okay, so the other thing is, what is the theme of your project? Is it relevant? Is it a universal theme, something that everybody can relate to? Maybe it's something going on in the news today. And this may also become part of the marketing strategy. If that's something that people connect to on a global scale, that may be the approach to the marketing. Think about what is the message to your film. You know, I often say if you're going to tell a story, there should be a point to it, and not in a heavy-handed way, not in a way where you're hitting people over the head with it. But there should be some point to your story, and that would be the theme. And that's usually what your main character is going to learn. That's going to be the journey of your main character along the way. So theme is important. Okay, also, who is the buyer for this project? Is it for a studio, for a streamer, for a network? Is it cable, pay cable? Try to identify who the perfect buyer is as well. You know, the reason for thinking about all these things and making this assessment is because when a producer falls in love with your script, he's then got to take it somewhere. So if you've got these things kind of figured out ahead of time, it can help really guide the strategy for getting your script set up. And an example of this would be a producer maybe who has a deal at Netflix. You know, if your project is right for Netflix, or maybe your project's better suited for Disney, you would find a producer that has a first look deal at one of those studios or one of those platforms. Okay, so another thing to think about is your script actor bait? Is there a lead role, or is it a platform for an actor, or is it a two-hander? Are there two actors that drive the story? You might want to target one or two of those actors. That could be an approach. Or target producers that have made movies with that actor. That's another way to go, because perhaps that producer has a relationship still with that actor, and it's easy for him to just pick up a phone and call them and send them your script. So that's another thing to think about. Another question to ask is it director-driven? You know, a lot of horror films are director-driven. They're really not sold based on the cast, or they really don't oftentimes have A-list actors, but they're really directorial. It's really the director who's the star of a horror movie. So perhaps you have a project that's more directorial, and then your approach might be to go to directors who are actually producers. Right? Directors who are production companies, who are producers. So that's another approach. Also, is it a project that might be female-driven? Perhaps these projects are more and more popular these days, female empowerment films, or films that could be directed by a female director or come from a female point of view. Those are projects that are easier to market right now. Is it an LGBTQ project? That's going to be another audience that is starved for content, and producers are going to be looking for that content. Is it a film that appeals to an African-American audience, an Asian audience, a Hispanic audience? These are all things that could be used in marketing your script. Those are some things that will identify whether or not your project is marketable, or identify the elements that you can use to market your project. And will you have all these things? Most definitely not, but you will have two or three. And those are the things that you're going to use in crafting your strategy for marketing your film. And those things are also very likely going to be included in your query letter, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, so once you've done an assessment of your script and you sort of identified what is marketable about your project, you want to get together your marketing materials. And your marketing materials will be your log line, a query letter, and a synopsis. Okay, those are the three pieces that you're going to need to start this process. Now, the log line, in my opinion, is one of the most important pieces of writing you will ever do. And your log line is what should make someone want to read your script. Okay, it's the thing that's going to hook them into wanting to request your script and want to read your script. Now, this is something I help writers with quite often. We really work on trying to perfect the log line, because I see so many log lines that really don't work at all. And I'd say that only a very small percentage of log lines are actually any good or effective. So this is really going to be an important piece of writing for you. A lot of log lines sound vague and can also sound very cliche. That's really unfortunate because I'm sure a lot of really great scripts slip by because their log line is just not very good and they're just not being marketed properly. Now, a lot of times someone will send me what they think is a log line, but it's actually what we call a tagline. I'm going to give you some examples of a tagline just so we can differentiate the difference. So here's one. In space, no one can hear you scream. That's from the movie Alien. I worked on a movie called Face Off early on in my career, and the log line to Face Off I thought was rather clever. To trap him, you must become him. And that was because in the story, they were trying to catch a terrorist, and Nicolas Cage is the terrorist, and John Travolta winds up taking on his face to actually trick him into revealing where he's planted a bomb. So that was the tagline for Face Off. To trap him, you must become him. The one for 40-year-old virgin's a funny one. A little racy. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. Thought that was kind of clever. So those are taglines, and those are very different from log lines. Those can be included in your query letter, but you're definitely going to need a log line. And let me give you some examples of log lines. This is the one for A King's Speech, which I thought was really, really strong. A stuttering king must rally his country to victory against the Nazis during World War II. I thought that was a very interesting log line. Kind of really hooks you into the story. A man wanting to serve his country during World War II enlists in the army but refuses to kill, so he becomes a conscientious objector and winds up winning the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's a film I made called Hacksaw Ridge, and that film has a very high concept to it. And so that is the log line for Hacksaw Ridge. Here's another one. A cop from Detroit comes to Beverly Hills to investigate the death of a friend. That's Beverly Hills Cop. Your log line should really only be a few sentences long. And when constructing a log line, you want to tell it from the point of view of your protagonist. Now, the log line should set up your protagonist, introduce the conflict, and then tease the ending. And this is a solid format to follow, but it can be modified. But those are the main components that you want to start with. Now, if your story has an ironic twist, this is also good. It serves as a good hook to kind of hook people into wanting to read your screenplay. Okay, so now once you have a great log line, now you need a really strong synopsis or summary. That should be about 1.5 pages long, single-spaced, that just tells the story in a narrative fashion. A lot of synopses that I read that people send me, just instead of telling the story, they will describe the story to me and tell me what the story is and tell me what I should be thinking about it, as opposed to just simply telling me the story. But what I'm looking for, and what a lot of producers are looking for, most producers are looking for, is primarily just really solid, really good storytelling. That's what's going to rule the day here. And a strong narrative that introduces the characters, sets up the situations, and then pays them off along the way. A story that's entertaining and about something. Just good old-fashioned storytelling, that's what's going to work. You don't need a big budget film. You don't need lots of locations or anything elaborate. If you have a great story, that's what's going to do it. People will recognize that, and if it's presented properly, they're going to request your script. The only other thing you can include in the synopsis are casting suggestions. I think that's always helpful. And sometimes I'll just add like a type. Like this is a Bradley Cooper type, or this is a Sandra Bullock type. That's very helpful in me kind of imagining the story as I'm reading it. So including casting suggestions in your synopsis are sometimes helpful. Sometimes you can add dialogue into the synopsis, and this is what's called a scriptment. We refer to that as a scriptment, and that sometimes is a good thing to do. But you don't want it to be very long, maybe only about 1.5 pages. You don't want it to be too short either, so maybe about 1.5 pages, 2 pages is about the right length. Okay, once we know what's marketable about your script and you have a great log line and a summary, now we start to build the query letter. And here are some of the components to a query letter. Now the first thing will be the person's name, and that will start with a Mr. or Ms. That's important, so you want to be nice and formal. You also want to include their title. Titles are very important. People work very hard in the industry, and when they achieve a title, that is kind of a status thing, and it's good for you to include that title. And you want to start things off on the right foot, right? So you want to be formal, you want to include their title, and then you want to include the company name, which sometimes I put all in capital letters. The other thing I suggest is in opening your letter, all right, you want to say, Dear Mr. or Ms. Again, be very formal. And open the letter by maybe appealing to their ego. Personalize it a little bit. Perhaps mention a film that they produced, or something about their work that you admire. This is always good, getting somebody on your side right away and open to wanting to read the rest of your letter. Consider opening your letter, too, with what inspired you to write the screenplay. Sometimes I always think that's good. Talk about that. But get to the log line as soon as possible, because in studies that have been done, people only read about an eighth of the way down your letter, so you're going to want to get to the heart of it right away. So keep it really brief, open with a short little opener, and then get right to that log line to try to hook them into the subject matter of the screenplay. Then include maybe one or two marketable elements about your screenplay that perhaps maybe it's good for an actress or a director. Maybe there's a relevant theme that you can refer to. And sometimes you can use an image as well. You can include an image. If you can come up with a really great image to sell your screenplay, that's something you can include. So if you have a really high concept idea, perhaps you can create an image that helps sell it. And then you want to wrap the letter up with offering to send a summary, perhaps, or the actual script. And finally, a great read, okay, what it's regarding. That's the first thing a person's going to see, so it's really important to get that right. So what you put in the subject line is something you want to give some thought to, because that's going to determine perhaps whether or not somebody opens your email. Studies have also been done, and email marketing is still the strongest way to market not only a screenplay, but any type of product. But people, as you probably know, don't open a lot of their emails anymore. They skip through emails. You might have to send a few emails. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Putting something in the read that gets them to want to open your email right away is going to be important. So some thought is going to want to be put into that as well. Okay, so now we have those marketing materials put together, and we've got the log line. We've got a great log line. We've got a really strong synopsis, and we've got a query letter, and we've got all those materials put together. We formulated our strategy now of who we're going out to, and the first thing we're going to do is fire this out to 100 people. When I'm working with clients, I have an email list of 100 producers and places that will accept unsolicited query letters. And what we do is we test that query letter. We send out 25, then we send out another 25, and then we might send out another 50. But we send it out to about 100 places to see what kind of reactions we get, and also to test to see which letter works the best, what marketing materials get us the best reaction. So that's something you're going to want to do. You're going to want to submit to a lot of people, because this is going to be kind of a numbers game at some point. You're going to want to get your query letter in front of as many producers as possible, so you have the best chance of getting the most amount of producers wanting to request it. Let me ask you, do you think you're doing all these things correctly? Because, if you had better marketing materials, don't you think you would get much better results? I think you would. You've got to really work on putting these materials together. I know writing the script was a lot of work. That took a lot of time and energy, but now you have to turn your attention to marketing, and you have to work on getting all these materials together so people will actually want to request your script. One thing about submitting, you should not be afraid to send out query letters or your script and think it might get sold. This is something that when I'm working with new clients, they are reticent about doing that, but you just have to get your work out there. People generally are not looking to steal your screenplay. And one thing I will tell you from a legal standpoint, you cannot legally protect an idea. So ideas can actually be taken, but the actual expression, the specific expression of an idea is what is protectable. So you definitely don't want to just query people with good ideas. You need to have a screenplay written at that point. And you want to take reasonable precautions like copywriting your work, registering your work with the guild. If you do those things, then you don't have to worry about your work being stolen, somebody taking your screenplay and running off with it. You should be confident sending out your work to producers and not have to worry about any of that. Okay, and also just keep a really good record. That is super important, right? So save all of your emails and just keep really good notes as well. Now, the other thing is, like I said, just only send out completed work. Don't send out just a synopsis or an idea or anything of that nature. Make sure that the work is completed, the screenplay is completed. But again, don't be afraid about sending out your work because generally you're sending your work to professionals, and professionals are not really looking to take someone else's ideas. They're looking to work with talented people that have good ideas. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so one of the best things about reaching out to people these days as a screenwriter is that most people avoid the phone. So you don't really have to get on a phone to hustle your work like you had to do in the past. You can use email. And email, like I said, is still one of the best marketing tools. But again, the open rates can be kind of low. But if you're someone who's good on the phone, then that's something you can try, and that might give you an edge, actually. And it's something that I do a lot, and I actually use a combination of emailing and phone calling. First, I'll send an email, and then sometimes I'll follow up with a phone call, or sometimes I have to make the phone call to get the email. But if you're good on the phone, that's something you should also do. Now, when you do this, your frame, okay, let's just talk psychologically what your frame should be one of giving, because you have a project that they're looking for, right? You have something really great that you're bringing them. So you're actually adding value to the equation. That should be your mindset, not like you're trying to get something from somebody. The mindset you should have, the frame you should have, is that you're giving somebody something that's really great. Now, just to kind of put you in the mind frame of the way producers think, producers want to discover someone new. The process of discovery is much more exciting sometimes than working with the same people or the usual suspects, so to speak. When you find someone who's really wildly talented and nobody knows about them, that's really powerful, and producers really like that. They like to be the first ones to discover something. So I want you to think about that. That's a producer's mindset in many cases. So when you're approaching them, they want to find a new great writer. Keep that in mind. My mentor always said he was more excited to read the gate guard script as opposed to the one the agents were pushing, because the agents, that became kind of a political thing, and sometimes they would just send out scripts whether they were good or not, or if they had to service a client, they would do some work for that client, but it never guaranteed that the scripts were any good. So he was always excited when he got a script from somebody like the gate guard or somebody just off the street, because the chances that it might be good were sometimes better, and the fact that he would discover somebody new was very exciting. And in fact, Antoine Fisher, if you know Antoine Fisher, he made a movie actually about his life. It's called The Antoine Fisher Story. He actually worked as a gate guard at Columbia Pictures, and that's how he got his start. It's a great story about how he would meet producers at the gate and talk to them about his screenplays. And in fact, that's how he actually got started in the film business as a professional writer. So the excitement of discovery, which should also be in your writing, is what excites people. And that's the frame you want to have when making these approaches. Okay, so a few rules for phone calls. One thing I like to do is call before or after hours, because that's when the office is really quiet and only maybe the assistant might be there, or the executive might actually be there reading a screenplay, and it's kind of slow and it's kind of quiet, and they might actually take your call. So your chances might be better to make the phone calls before hours or during the lunchtime. And when you make the phone call, the first thing I'll always say to the person is, hey, do you have a minute? That is a really powerful statement. Do you have a minute? Because this gets people wanting to help you, because it shows that you respect their time and respect the fact that they're really super busy. So I always open my phone call with that. Hey, do you have a minute? And I ask them if they, can give me that person's email, or if that person's available, or if I have a question for them, I can get on with that question. So do you have a minute? That's a really, really powerful way to open a phone call. Be sure you get the person's name, all right? Assistants are the gatekeepers, and you're going to want to be able to get past them, obviously, and by schmoozing the gatekeepers, that's going to be a way to get past to the executive. So make sure you get that person's name and refer to them by their name when you call back, or refer to them by their name in your letter or when you send the screenplay, be sure to thank them, all right? Because that person's going to be the person that's going to then stay on top of that executive to get back to you in the follow-up. So you really want to win them over. Also, if you're calling, be ready to pitch your project. A lot of times people will call my office and not thinking they're going to get me on the phone. They get me on the phone and they're not ready to pitch. They just freeze up, all right? So make sure you're ready to pitch and that you can do it quickly so you've practiced it and you're good at it. Only pitch one project at a time, okay? If you get an executive wanting to hear your pitch, just pitch them the project. If they're not into it, move on. You can always come back around a few weeks later, maybe a couple months later, and see if that executive is open to hearing another pitch. But don't inundate people with lots of pitches. Make sure each one is important and that you pitch it like it's the best idea and it's something that they should be focused on and be paying attention to ASAP. All right, so don't mix projects. Don't pitch more than one project. And get everybody's email when you call. Make sure to get the proper emails so you can follow up. Now, always be polite, be professional. Don't take any of this personally because it's not. The assistants are the gate guards, but as I said, they can be disarmed and also be used to your advantage. Now, these days, it's going to maybe take 6 or 7 tries, okay, in my experience, to get someone's attention. So you have to be persistent. You have to have tenacity. Kind of like Charlie Sheen in the movie Wall Street, the way that he targeted Gordon Gekko. He kept following up. He learned when his birthday was. He learned his favorite cigars. He showed up with the cigars. He brought flowers for the assistant. All these things, okay, are good to do. It's important to get names, like I mentioned, and to be forming relationships. Be forming relationships. You know, in life, every good thing that's ever happened to me has come through a personal relationship. So personal relationships are going to be the key to your success. Now, I mentioned earlier on about knowing what's going on in the marketplace, knowing what sells, knowing what's marketable about your script. So you should be not only watching lots of movies and watching lots of TV shows, you know, also keeping in mind what's selling. You want to be reading the trade papers like DeadlineHollywood.com, Variety, Hollywood Reporter. Those are the two stalwarts that have been around forever. Or maybe IndieWire or The Wrap. These are all websites that you can go to that publish news about Hollywood. They talk about what scripts are selling, what projects are being set up, what movies are being made, and you want to become very well versed in what's selling, okay? Because that's going to be helpful in what you should be writing and also how you should be approaching the marketing of your screenplay. So definitely know the marketplace, okay? Do your homework, see what's selling. Get to know all the players. Get to know who's the head of all the studios. Get to know who the development executives are, who the producers are, what kind of material they're looking for. All these things are going to be helpful. I actually have a database with every major company and every producer in town, and I use this with clients when we're trying to tailor an approach for marketing their script. One of the best databases that I've come across that is available to you would be IMDb Pro, and IMDb Pro is a subscription service. It costs about $15 a month, but you should definitely get to know how to use it. It can be a really powerful tool in helping you find information. Now, I mentioned the first 100 emails. We use this email list that I have to query the first 100 producers. But the holy grail would be the producers that have first look deals. Those are the producers that you really want to target. Producers that have first look deals with studios or streaming platforms. And there is a list of these producers. It's called Facts on Packs, and it's published rather by Variety. And if you Google Facts on Packs, you can find the list of producers that have first look deals, and those are the producers you should start with targeting once you've tested your query letter and your log line. In fact, I'll post a link to that list below. Now, once you've had someone request your script, the most important thing, and this is one thing that I find most writers do not do, and that is to follow up. You've got to follow up. Follow up is one of the most important things you can do, because just because you sent a script to a producer doesn't mean, and they haven't gotten back to you, doesn't mean they've read it and don't like it. Believe me, there are many cases where things slip through the cracks. There are many cases where producers are just overwhelmed and busy and your material just slips by them, and you've got to follow up. This is something that's really imperative that I urge you to do. The appropriate time to follow up when you send out material is about 2 weeks. Okay, so you've got to give someone enough time, be respectful of their time. And if they're an extremely busy producer, it might be, 3 weeks, maybe even a month. But continue to follow up, continue to be polite, be professional, be persistent. Okay, because that that's a quality that producers really admire. And again, like I said before, your approach should be that you are bringing them something of value. So you shouldn't be afraid to keep following up because you don't want them to miss out. That should be your mind frame. Just to bring you back on this side of things, to get you inside my crazy head, when people follow up with me, it starts me thinking that maybe there is something really good there because it shows that they believe in it. Following up is something that people rarely do. So when they're doing it, it makes me think that they're getting good reactions, good responses from that screenplay, or it's something they really believe is something of value or something that I'm going to be interested in. That's why they keep following up with me. So that's sort of the subtext of the message you're sending when you keep following up. So keep doing it. Now, psychology of all this is important, and in my consulting services, we do talk a lot about the psychology of what's going on here, because a lot of this is going to be a head game. All right, you're going to, as a writer, you spend a lot of solitary time one-on-one with your computer and inside your head, and you can come up with a lot of creative scenarios as to why someone doesn't want to read your work or why they don't think your screenplay is any good. But instead of telling those stories, you've got to just change your story. Just because someone passes on your script doesn't mean that it's not good. All right? You only need one person to say yes to get a movie made. So you got to just keep at it. One of the most important things I've learned in life is it's not what happens to you that really matters. It's how you react to what happens. If people aren't responding to your query letter, or if people aren't responding to your script and you just give up, then you're out of the game. You've given up. But if you don't react to that and you keep driving forward, you keep striving for that goal, you're going to get there. Okay? So it's really a lot about how you react to things. You just got to go out there and believe your material is good, believe that someone wants to read your script, believe that you have a movie there that should be made. Just stay with it. All right? You got to just keep trying. The difference between the people that succeed and don't succeed, literally, it breaks down to the people who are doing it and who are not doing it. Okay, I can tell you it's not the most talented people that are successful. It's talented people who are the most persistent who are successful. I know a lot of talented people who are not successful, and that is unfortunate. But, sometimes you just have to have more than talent to be successful. So this is going to be the key, all right? Just getting out there and doing it. Okay, so my question to you is, are you really serious about this? If I still have your attention at this point, that's a really good sign. So let me know if I can help, okay? To learn from books and courses is good, but you have to learn from professionals, from people who are doing it every day. And, my experience can save you years of time trying to figure it out. Like I said before, this is a serious profession, and having success, the rewards can be great, but you've got to take this really seriously. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, email me at sl@longitudeentertainment.com, or you can contact me through the website or my Facebook page that I created for writers at Longitude Entertainment. Stay hopeful, be positive, and keep on writing.